You made it! Yay! Last day, woohoo, other than the test, of course. But again, I'll be sending the test to you via email. It'll be multiple choice questions, and again, the review sheet is online. I gave you a copy of the review sheet last week, but if you need a hard copy, just let me know and I'll send you one via email. So, you've done it. We've gone through the entire process of doing a show from beginning to end. Today we're going to talk about some oddball, quirky things like touring, like picking a show, picking an environment. How to figure out whether it's in the round or proscenium or thrust or those sort of things. First of all, just talk about how to pick a play. If you are in a position where you may have been involved in community theater, or you may have been involved in a college situation, or you may be a member of a high school teaching, at some point you may have the opportunity to pick a play that you're going to produce, you're going to direct. It is a great privilege. It can be intimidating. A lot of people hate doing it. Let me warn you against this. I'm going to do it the negative way. Well, before I tell you what I think about it, here's a little video on what the man in Florida thinks about picking a play.
On behalf of TVLessonDotCom, my name is Joseph Adler, and I'm producing artistic director of Gable Stage in Coral Gables, Florida. In this clip, I'm going to talk about how you select the piece you direct. Now, first of all, that's very rare, especially in the beginning, for any director. We don't often get a chance to select the piece. Many of us are, quote, hired guns. We get called by artistic directors and producers and handed material. And in most cases, especially at the beginning of your career, we rarely are able to say no. So the question becomes how to get enthusiastic about a play that you're offered to direct. And it's surprising how easy that becomes, even if it's a play that you wouldn't ordinarily have chosen. So what if you get the choice? Well, when you're fortunate enough to run your own theater or to have the opportunity to select a play, there are so many factors that go into making that decision. I'm lucky because I pick 6 plays a year. We do plays 12 months a year here. So I get to not just pick the play, but to pick the season. And so I try to pick a play in tandem with the other plays that will precede it and come after it. I think the first play of the season is important, obviously, because you're trying to build your audience for the entire season. The last play is crucial because you want to make sure to get them back for the next season. And all the other plays in the middle are dependent upon so many factors. But I think the personal tastes of a director play a big role in this. And, even though you may pick plays that are period, plays that are classics, plays that are new plays, there is some commonality, I would think, and that's probably up to the critics and others to be able to find. But I do think schizophrenic programming is the biggest mistake that directors or theaters can make. By that I mean, if you pick a season and you're looking to sell to subscribers that entire season, when you bounce around from a play that will please this group but not that group to a play that will conversely please the other group but not, you've wound up pleasing no one. The one who came to the first one hates the second one, and there on it goes. And that's very detrimental to the process for any regional theater that is trying to build an ongoing audience. On behalf of TVLesson.com, I'm Joseph Adler. Thank you for watching.
All right, so that's his opinion. But again, he's been doing theater for 40 years, 50 years, so that's a very good, valuable point of view. I would suggest it is often nice when you're picking a play to know that there are people around who could do the play. If you're, for instance, living and breathing in a world, let's say that you teach at a university that is 95% black, you might not want to do a play that is 95% white. Or you may be adapting a play that usually is white. You might be able to do Crimes of the Heart as an all-black play. Yes, who knows? But you might want to just, again, look at the casting, traditional casting of the show, and determine if the people that are around could perform the role. Again, colorblind casting is fantastic. I would even suggest that sexual blind casting is fine. We're doing a production of Midsummer, yes, that has Puck traditionally as a male figure. We have a female Puck. We have female, you understand what I'm saying. You could, male roles traditionally don't have to be performed by males, and female roles don't traditionally have to be performed by females in the modern world, and that is a great advantage. Again, Hamilton being a great example of that type of casting. But still, you want to make sure, if you're going to do Hamilton, for instance, that you have people that can sing. If you're a part of a conservatory that has a musical theater program, you probably have a lot of singers and a lot of dancers around. I wouldn't do Death of a Salesman necessarily, but Death of a Salesman might be a tough one to do because you need an older guy who's about to retire. Yes, so again, those type of things are all involved in choosing a play. Having said that, I would avoid precasting like the plague. The worst experiences I've ever had in theater have almost always been tied to somebody who's been precast in a show. For whatever reason. I'm not gonna go into, because it's always different and it's always personal. But precasting people is just a formula for failure. Again, hopefully I've said that strong enough. But still, knowing that there are people in your acting pool that could perform the role. Having said that, they're godsends. Yes, again, we're doing Midsummer Night's Dream. I know of several people that could have played Oberon, but then we had auditions, and I had a man show up who was fantastic. So you have to say, you know what? That's a godsend. Yes, so that makes it just that much easier to cast everyone else because you suddenly have roles that you're wary of. But again, those people in the community, once they hear you're doing that type of show, say, hey, I can be good at that. So they show up. Let's just talk real quick about the way I choose a play. First of all, I tend to like to do plays that are one of two things. I love to do historical plays like Shakespeare, like Chekhov, like The House Bernard Alva. Plays that are historically important plays that have been proven over time to be solid plays, that have been proven to be meaningful plays. The great thing about them is because those authors are dead and gone, you can do anything you want to with them. They're in public domain. Make them fun, make them interesting. Have people who can play instruments, add songs, add modern touches. You can, change the time it was written. Put Shakespeare in the Wild Wild West. Why not? Just find a way to tell the same story, but tell it to a modern audience, and make those connections and understand who your audience is. If you're teaching in a university, your students are going to be between 18 and 22 years old in that community. Yes, they're going to understand certain things. If you're in the Shakespeare Festival, your audience is going to be a little older. They're going to be a little more informed. Yes, so you might not do a silly kind of thing. You might do a more intelligent kind of interpretation. Not that you don't do the silly, because people find silly fun. Yes, or not that you don't do intelligent for these students, because they find that fun. But again, you can sort of pick the play knowing who your audience is going to be and how they will be entertained. If you're in a high school situation, there are a lot of plays that are particular to high schools. If you're in a community theater situation, there's a whole mess of shows that are written for small community theaters to do in small towns. Backroads, country, Cotton Patch Gospel, for instance, is 5 people singing the Book of Matthew. And you gotta have somebody who plays the bass guitar, or the stand-up bass, either one, a guitar and a banjo and a mandolin. Yes, it's a fantastic show, and it sells like crazy. Again, not something you do everywhere, every time, but it's something that certainly works in small communities. Once you have chosen a play, or once a play has been chosen for you, there are some theaters that allow for you to change the actor-audience relationship. And some plays can work better in more intimate environments. If you've got a play that is about the soul of an individual, having it in the round or having it in thrust can sometimes get that audience that much closer to that character and get that much more understanding and investigation that the audience can pursue. If you're doing Hamilton, big splashy musical where you've got hundreds of people dancing, guys and dolls, that sort of thing, that does not need to be done in thrust stage. Now, if you have a thrust stage and you have to do it in thrust stage, that's what you have. But if you have the alternative, big splashy musicals tend to work with a little bit of distance because you have a large number of people on stage dancing and moving, and the choreography becomes important. If you have intimate plays, those plays can work better in smaller environments. So again, as a reminder, you have proscenium, which is where the audience is on one side, the actors on the other. You have thrust, where the audience is on three sides of the acting space, and the acting space actually thrusts out into the theater itself. Then you have in the round, where the audience is on all four sides. And then you have what I call flexible staging, or a black box theater, where you can do all those. You can change it and do stadium seating. You can do theater in the corner. The seats aren't permanent. They can be changed and moved about, which is what we have at AUM as a black box. So those are the typical environments. Again, just a little bit of information about how they may differ. Enjoy this.
Theater is storytelling, and there are many ways and in many settings that you can tell a great story. This video discusses the four main types of stages and how shows function in each. So let's start with the first type of theater space, which probably you're most familiar with, a proscenium stage. While this type of stage may be familiar to you, the name of it may not be. The word proscenium is Latin and means in front of the scenery. Proscenium originally referred to the stage area where the story took place in front of the scenery. In a proscenium theater, the audience directly faces the stage, which is typically raised several feet above the front row of the audience level, and views the performance through the proscenium arch, which is essentially like a picture frame through which you see the story of the play come to life. From one side of the proscenium arch to the other, along the floor, is an imaginary line called the plaster line. It was named such from when proscenium arches were ornate and adorned with plaster figures such as angelic beings above the stage. In a proscenium theater, all measurements start from the plaster line, which is like the stage's zero. First electric, second electric, third electric, and so on start from the plaster line and go towards the back of the stage. First catwalk, second catwalk, and so on start from the plaster line and go toward the back of the house. Also, set designers use the plaster line along with the center line of the stage for reference points when designing and creating set plans. Downstage from the plaster line on a proscenium stage is an area known as the apron. Although the apron was traditionally not used as acting space since it was outside of the play's picture frame, nowadays it is more and more used as we try to give our audiences a more personal experience, the type of experience that modern audiences can get from a movie in their living rooms, but find it hard to get from a play that is staged too far away from them. This, of course, is a director's preference as to whether or not to use the apron as acting space, although sometimes this choice is dictated by fire code, which requires that the space stay clear for the theater's fire curtain to drop if needed. The second type of stage is an arena stage, where the audience sits on all four sides of the stage. Actors enter down the same aisles the audience uses, as they are the only entrances and exits available. This stage provides a very intimate feel and works well with a smaller cast and a limited number of set pieces. Scene changes for this set are usually limited because it clutters the stage and blocks the audience's view. Since stage directions, such as upstage, downstage, stage left, stage right, are irrelevant with this type of stage, sometimes directors use compass directions, such as north, south, east, and west, or clock directions, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and so on. Strong blocking choices for a show on an arena stage is critically important so the audience members can best see the action. Placing characters on diagonals, using the stage corners as guides, and turning much of the action inward are choices that make seeing the show more enjoyable for the audience. The third type of stage is a thrust stage. This type of stage is basically a combination of the prosceniums and arena stages. Imagine taking the apron of a proscenium stage and thrusting it into the audience until there's audience on all three sides. On this stage, the actors enter and exit through audience aisles or upstage entrances and exits. And turning the play's action inward on diagonals is also important for this type of stage as well. The final type of stage is what is known as a flexible, or sometimes called an environmental stage. Flexible stages can take on many different forms and functions and allow for extreme creativity on the part of the director. Here is just one example of how flexible staging could work. Black box theaters are a type of flexible theater space, but outdoor theater and various other types of non-traditional theater spaces could be included. Here's our Rockford High School proscenium stage. Now, you probably don't recognize it because for this show, Flowers for Algernon, which I directed in 2008, it was converted into a black box theater space. For this show, the stage and the audience seating were both placed on the main stage, and drapes and a lighting grid were hung to create an intimate space for an intimate show. Staging the show this way also allowed us to bring to the surface a metaphor of that particular show, a maze, which we projected onto the stage floor piece by piece at different points as the story and character progressed. This maze was in no way written into the script, but staging the show in a different type of theater space allowed us to develop the show's metaphor into a real, live visual for the audience. On a proscenium stage, the audience would not have seen the maze or some of the other intricacies of the show, but creatively adjusting the way and the space in which we told the story allowed the audience to have a completely different theatrical experience.
Again, as a director, there's different power positions in each type of play. Down center in proscenium stage works great. In the round, there is no such thing as down center. So the top of aisles become very important. And thrust stages, down center and the top of aisles become very important because you're looking at most of the audience at the top of the aisle. So again, depending upon how you're staging the play, it may change the environment and the important parts of the environment. Cool? All right, if you are someone who is working at a high school or a college, a lot of times you may be involved in what I'm going to call competitions. Yes? There are 4 basic types of competitions. One usually is in high schools where you have what's called a 45-minute version of the play, where everybody uses this. You have 3 blocks, a door, a window unit, and a staircase. And you can do whatever you want to with those 3 blocks, a door, staircase. You can set them up however you want to, but everybody's got the same stuff to work with. There's no particular, you can add props to them for your play. You can have costumes, that sort of stuff. A lot of times in those situations, there'll be like a little squared off area that's white tape, and anything you're gonna do in that 45 minutes has gotta be set up in that space. They start the clock, and then you set up the stage, you perform the show, and everything has to be back in that square in 45 minutes. So again, you may do Hamlet, but you're only doing the 45-minute version of Hamlet. Again, it's a cutting. There are very good versions of 45-minute plays out there, but because, again, it happens in a lot of high schools because, again, Alabama, we have the Trumbauer Festival, and Texas is the UIL Festival. Different states have different competition names, but they're all basically the same sort of thing. And because you want to have as many during the day as you can, 45-minute play allows for a 15-minute changeover. And then if you have a Friday, Saturday, Sunday sort of thing where you have 8 shows on Friday, 8 on Saturday, and 4 or 5 on Sunday, you can get 20 different high schools to compete over the course of a weekend, which is encouraging everyone to attend those things. And oftentimes you will have additional things to have, like people teaching how to juggle, or people teaching how to draw, or whatever it is. In addition to the festival that's going on as far as performances, you'll also have some ability to teach lessons to people who are there. And again, you'll have awards at the end of the week that they'll have the best 45-minute play, they'll have the best actor, best ensemble, that sort of thing. So that's one type of competition. A second type is what we do at ACTF nowadays, where we have judges who go to the individual theaters. So when we do a show at AUM, we perform the show, and we pay the American College Theater Festival to send a judge to us. The nice thing about that is that other than the night the judge shows up, we try and get a crowded audience, just because it usually helps to have audience members around. But it doesn't cost you anything, or doesn't change anything about the performances. The judge, can't make it, the show goes on. The judge makes it, great. At the end of the show, typically there's a talk back. Val has all kind of rules about talkbacks. If you would like to talk to her for an hour, ask her about rules about talkbacks. She'll go into them with you. I'm not going to go into them here, but there are basic ways of handling notes. And again, the problem is you've got one person's opinion about what they've just seen, and certain people, again, may not have given the best performance that night, or they may have. But out of that, you're going to have people nominated to go to the various competitions, to go to ACTF, to compete in Aaron Ryan competition, for instance, or designers that can be passed on in those sort of areas. Another type of competition is then at the regional festival. We used to do this at the state level as well, but it became cost prohibitive, because you can then take the show, and instead of doing it at your theater, you now take this show and you tour to a regional site. Now, because of COVID, we didn't do that this year. This year everybody just did video productions. But again, my guess is in the future we will have a return to the more traditional, everybody travels to a particular site. And of course, then you have the cost of the transporting, of housing, of feeding actors, technicians over the course of a 3 or 4 day period. It's going to cost you, or the theater, $10,000, $15,000 sometimes. If you rent a bus, if you have a bus, if you drive individually, you pay for gas, that sort of thing. So that can be very cost prohibitive. But again, it's a way for you to compete against other shows within your region, within your area, and to actually see the performance. Now, those shows have to be planned to tour, to travel. We'll talk more about touring and traveling here in a second, but you generally are going to have to load those into a truck and then unload. I find that for our students, it is a great advantage having done those type of shows when they actually work on tours, because they've been able to have experienced what it's like to go in and hang a light plot in a day and focus it and run, start at 8 o'clock in the morning and unload the show and set up the show and hang the lights and focus the lights and do all the rigging and all that sort of stuff and do the show and then put it all back in the truck. That's an all-day event. That's what you do on tours, right? And so having had that experience as a tour in college, I think is very helpful. The other type of, the fourth type of competition are what I would call 10-minute play competitions. It could be scenes from plays, but these are much smaller venue kind of things, where you have a couple of people, maybe 3 or 4 people that do a scene from a play. Typically there's no scenery. Typically there may be some costume pieces, that sort of thing. And there typically is an award at the end of the week. But I would say it is far less, it's much more grinder, much more the wham bam thinking man kind of thing. And it can, because you, in those other competitions, you typically have the same judges watching each of the shows. In the 10-minute play competition or the scenes play competition, a lot of times you'll have different rooms, and each room will have their own set of judges. And so while you may be the best play in that room, you may be the worst play, the 10th best play overall, depending on how many rooms there are, that sort of thing. And so sometimes good plays don't get passed along because you have a particularly good room of good plays, and sometimes plays that aren't that good get passed along because they were the best play in that room, if that makes any sense. Same sort of thing with actors. Sometimes the best actors all wind up in the same room because you don't have any pre-screening. You just, everybody gets divided up either alphabetically or just who applied first, that sort of thing. And so those type of competitions can be not as fair as the other type of competitions, just a warning. So those are type of things that you can plan for as a director. Again, especially the competitions that have play, that time limits. You're going to be there with a stopwatch, saying 45, go, 10-minute play competition, go. Because at 10:01, you lose. One of the things, when you are entered in a competition, there are going to be rules about how to apply for that competition. Now, let's say you have 20 plays at a high school play competition. There are going to be, 2, 5, how many judges that are going to vote. A lot of times, there are differences of opinions about what is good and what is bad, obviously. They're looking for anything they can find to eliminate a show. And if you haven't filled out a certain question, or if you haven't been, didn't show up at the right time, or you go over in your 45 minutes or your 10 minutes, that's a reason to eliminate you. And that way they don't have to think about you, because they can think about the other 19 plays and choose the best of the other 19 because you didn't follow the rules. So I would always, if you ever have a time limit or have to be, even a date to have applied for, I would apply at least a week before, and I would have at least 5 seconds or 10 seconds added to the end so that you're done well ahead of time on any of those things. Just as a caveat, because I've seen a number of people that had great plays, but they went a minute over or a second over even. Anyway, those competitions, they're trying their darndest. I'm not blaming any one person. I'm just telling you the way things typically are. You always need to know who's eligible to compete. A lot of times you'll have you will only be able to compete in certain regions, certain states. What type of play is acceptable? A lot of times there are people like Neil Simon who don't like their plays cut. And so you can't cut a Neil Simon play down to 45, no matter how good the play is or how good the cutting is. He doesn't like it, he doesn't allow it. So you've got to know that a play can be used that way. Sometimes there's a rule about how you need to assemble the company. You can only have a certain number of actors or a certain number of crew members. A lot of times this is because if you're competing against, well, let's use the example, if you've got 500 students in your graduating, each class in your high school. You got 2,000 people in your high school, you have 200 members that are taking drama, you can have all those people and move the sets on and off and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got a little country theater that has 10 people in it, that has, a football team that only has 12 people on it, and that play offense and defense. And suddenly you're having a competition among those two universities, or those two environments. Obviously, just by sheer numbers, the school that has the larger numbers will have an unfair competitive advantage. And so to even that playground, a lot of times there'll be a rule that you only have a certain number of actors. Let's say you can only have 10 actors. Now you can have less, obviously, or you can only have 4 crew members. You have to have a stage manager, you have to have somebody, a light person, whatever the rules are. So again, there's going to be rules about that. There's going to be a rule about how the responses are distributed. Sometimes they're talkbacks. Sometimes the talkback is while the other company is setting up for their show. Sometimes it's open to the public. Sometimes it's a written talkback that they will send you later. So again, how you're going to receive the information and how you give it out to your actors. What cost it's going to incur are important for the financial institution, fiduciary responsibility, and of course the deadlines, as we mentioned earlier. All right, which brings us to our last subject, touring. Tours are entities unto themselves. As a director, oftentimes you need to, because the show is designed to tour, there are a lot of decisions that will be made for you simply because the show has got to fit in certain spaces and certain time limits. You've got to be able to get it into a truck. And so you've got to fit it, if it's a national tour, you may have 10 trucks that you can fit it onto. If it's a regional tour, maybe 3 trucks you fit it onto. If it's a local tour, you may have a rider truck that lights, sound, costumes, props, everything fits on. And so again, obviously in one of those instances, you can have lots more stuff than you can have in the other. So again, a lot of times just the type of tour you're doing will limit what you're doing. There are 4 basic types of tours. There's what are called national tours, which are shows that are typically currently running on Broadway. Obviously Broadway is shut down right now, but it'll open up. It's up by the end of the fall, I hope. But a first national tour is literally a show that is running also simultaneously on Broadway. But a national tour tends to have sit-downs that are week-long, 2-week-long, month-long sit-downs in major cities like Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Los Angeles. The theater companies, the company tours, sometimes there'll be a West Coast company and an East Coast company. There'll be big name tours. Oftentimes they'll have stars associated with them, that sort of thing. That's a national tour. If you can get on one of those, you're going to get per diem, which is going to pay for your housing and food for your whole run. And oftentimes you don't really spend any of your paycheck because per diem is very generous on those type of tours. Then there's what are called regional tours. Oftentimes these are produced, like the Springer Opera House might produce a tour, the Alabama Shakespeare Festival might produce a tour, and they will go out into the region that they are in. So the Southeast, it may be that you do the East Coast, that sort of thing. But they're going to be sit-downs for a day, maybe 2 days. But mostly you're doing a show, 6-7 shows a week, and every night you're in a different place. And you load in at 8 o'clock that morning, you do the show at 10 o'clock at night, you put it all back in the truck. You got a bus full of actors, you got a couple of trucks full of scenery and props and costumes and all that sort of stuff. And that's a regional tour. You also have what is called a bus and truck tour, which is literally just one bus and one truck, which again, tours typically to smaller communities like Montgomery will get bus and truck shows. We may get a regional tour. Those are the 2 types of tours we get. The regional tour typically has a producer that does tours often. A bus and truck tour may just be a one-off. Some theater company had a great show and they decided to take it on tour, but they don't typically tour. And so a lot of times you're going to wind up with technical directors, for instance, who work at the theater who originated the show. but aren't really designed, the show wasn't really designed to tour, it just tours, it was adapted to tour, that sort of thing. And the tours runs are limited 6 months, that sort of thing. The regional tours, a year or so. The national tours could be 5 years that you're out on tour. If you go to Europe, that sort of stuff with national tours. And then the local tour, something like the ballet doing Nutcracker, where you go for a day and you come back. They are just literally one-off shows. Again, hopefully the show has been designed to tour, and in Nutcracker's case it has been. But a lot of times they're just shows that were very successful that somebody said, hey, could you bring that to our town? And people say, sure. And then of course they realize that it wasn't designed to tour, and so things don't break away as easily as they should, and that sort of thing. You will also have what are called the different versions. Within those 4 types of tours, you'll have the A show, the B show, the C show, the D show, and the E show. So, and again, the technical director and the stage manager typically will go into the theater environment when they arrive, and they will say, ooh, we're 5 fly lines short for the A show, we're gonna do the B show. Or we don't have the wing space for this wagon stage left, and so we're gonna cut that wagon. They will literally go bit by bit through the show and determine what parts of the show they can do and what parts of the show they can't do. The E show is what's called the concert version. It's the actors in their costumes on stage with maybe a couple of props and maybe a drop, but it is just the concert version. The A show is everything, all the bells and whistles, and everything in between is the B show, C show, or D show, yes? A lot of times, for instance, the producer will have paid for what they think is the C show, and because they don't have the equipment, they'll get the E show. Sometimes they're happy with that, sometimes they're not. And in that case, that's where they deal with the production manager, right? We talked about the production manager a couple weeks ago. So the company manager, again, is traveling with the company. As a director, oftentimes, if it's a local tour, oftentimes you become the company manager. If it's a national tour, you haven't seen the show in years. You directed that sucker in 1980, and it's still running, and you're still making money off of it because you directed the original 42nd Street. Typically, again, even on all those shows, except for the sit-downs of the Nationals, but even the first day of the National, you're gonna start loading in at 7 or 8 in the morning. You're gonna have about 4 or 5 hours to load the set in. You're gonna have a couple of hours to load the lighting in. Again, depending on what the fly line situation is, you may do the lights first and then the set, because things need to fly and that sort of thing. But then around noon, 1 o'clock, you take the lunch breaks. Oftentimes they're staggered. So lighting may take their lunch at noon while the set people are finishing up. And then at 1 o'clock, the set people take their break, and 1 o'clock the lighting people come back, so that not everybody breaks at the same time, so that somebody's constantly working in the theater. The cast will typically arrive around 3:30 or 4 that afternoon. They'll be shown to the dressing rooms. They'll be shown to the stage. They will have warm-ups. They may do like choreography bits or stage some things that might be difficult. There may be some scene shift rehearsals during that time period. But again, around 6:30, the stage is gonna go dark. You're gonna sweep and mop. Around 7, you're gonna have half hour where the actors are back from dinner. And around 7:30, you do a show for 2.5 hours. At 10 o'clock, the actors take their final curtain call. They go down, take their costumes off. The costumes travel dirty. And when they arrive the next day at the theater, that's when they do the laundry while the sets and the lights are setting up. The laundry people are doing the laundry. But then the actors get back on their bus. Oftentimes the actors will go to a hotel and spend the night. The crew will sleep on their bus. The crew will strike the show for a couple hours, 3 hours, get it back on the truck, and because they have to start at 8 o'clock the next morning, there's not time for them to go to a hotel. They will just have a bunk in a bus, and they will travel from point A to point B. Again, hopefully your production manager has given you enough time between, let's say, 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock to drive 7 hours to your next appointment, or 6 hours if you're starting at 6. Oftentimes, traffic being what traffic is, bridges being what bridges are, hurricanes being what hurricanes are, companies arrive late, and so that schedule can be condensed very quickly, and it could be a reason why you were supposed to do the C show, and even though you have the physical ability to do it, you don't have the time to do it, right? So there are other reasons why you might have to do those type of things. Again, as a director, you need to know that those people, the type of pressures those people are going to be under, and so you may need to have an understanding of what they're going through. Just as an example, here's a little video of Wicked on tour. enjoy.
What was important for me regarding Wicked was if I was going to leave New York and if I was going to leave a Broadway career, I wanted to make sure that I was with a show that was Broadway quality. I came out here for a year and it's 4 years later. That's how proud I am. Absolutely love it. I think the story's great. It's a spectacle. So, right now we're unloading 13 trucks to put the show up. It takes about 30 hours to put in. So it's a big show. But on top of that, it's got a story that has such heart to it that, I think that's really what caught me by surprise. On the road, because we change cities every month or so, we get to know a city. So what's kind of great is that, so we bring Wicked to St. Louis and we get to experience new restaurants, we get to experience, museums of that city, sports events of that city, all of that kind of stuff. And so people come in and they're all like energized and jazzed up, which helps us put on a really good show on the road. What I love about this cast in particular right now is that they're really good actors. We have really good actors. Sometimes you have really good singers that aren't, great at acting, or really good dancers that aren't great at acting. We have a really big group of triple threats. I'm really excited about the show right now. It's in great shape. People are really energized. We have a company that really wants to be doing this. We're lucky.
So, next class period or next time is our exam. Hopefully you've given me your prompt script today. Now, here's the fun part. And if you've made it to this part of the video, you're gonna really enjoy this. As a director, everything that I've said to you this semester is just advice. Throw it all out. Each play is different, each play is new, each cast member is different, each person is gonna respond different to the way you work. You're gonna work different with different people. It is nice to have had an experienced person, hopefully, to tell you some of my experiences and some of the choices that I've had to make. But ultimately, it's who you are and how you tell the story. And that's ultimately what this is. It is the art of telling a story with people. And that's a difficult art. It is a lot easier to do a painting, in my opinion, or to sculpt, or to make a statement and let everybody interpret it. It is very hard to coordinate all these individuals, designers, technicians, actors, stagehands, all these people that are all working for the good of the show, and then to have it somehow communicate to an audience that you've never met, that you will never see in your life, and have them have an emotional reaction to a story that you're telling. It's magic. And magic is indescribable. It is what it is. So again, hopefully, you've enjoyed the class. I've enjoyed doing these videos, that's for sure. Hopefully I'll never have to do these videos again, but it is something nice to fall back on. So someday I'll look back on with fun. So Chris, thanks for coming in. And thank you, Cody, for all your help in this class. I appreciate it. All right, we'll see you next, or we'll send the test to you next week. Thanks.